Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company. Of course, we are live on the 440 Sports Network. Of course, we are presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical here on the program today. As we've got in again, like and subscribe, tell all your friends. We've really gotten our subscriber numbers up. We're almost there at 3,500, which I think would give me 1,000 more than my old employer. So get those subscribers coming. Get your buddies, tell your friends, get everybody you know, like and subscribe. We will most likely, just some housekeeping here, most likely not have a show tomorrow. Snowmageddon, which I don't know what it looks like is going to happen or not happen. Snowmageddon has changed my plans. I was supposed to fly out on Sunday. Instead, I will be flying out on Friday. So tomorrow, I don't think we'll have a show, but I do anticipate over the weekend we'll have some shows, especially with Sam Darnold playing in the NFC Championship game. So we'll see where that goes from there. First, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor before we get into the offensive coordinator search, which we got names for. And Easton going to hop on at 2:35 here on the program, or 35 minutes into the stream if you're watching later. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Great partners of mine. They've been great partners of mine for years, and they continue to be great partners down the road. They've been in business since 1990. They are family-owned and operated. 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be, or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. You can learn more by visiting their website at happyhiller.com. That's where I go to book. Professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians that come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. Care is their core value. They believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. And that's why, again, I love Hiller. Join the Happy Hiller Club just like me. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay. Let's start on the offensive coordinator search. And if you're looking at the screen, it says, welcome to the OC search. And I really wanted to put, welcome to the OC search. Bitch. Shows you my age, growing up when the OC was very popular on Fox back in the day. And we've got an OC search because Tom Pelissero this morning at NFL Network put out there that the Titans continue to work through offensive coordinator options with Kliff Kingsbury, Arthur Smith, Brian Daboll, Adam Stenavich, and Bobby Slowik among, I think it should be amongst, but that's fine, among the potential options per sources. All have offensive coordinator experience as Robert Saleh looks for the right man to work with quarterback Cam Ward. So again, there's your list. If you're wondering about what kind of guy they're going to have out there, there's your list. It is Arthur, Kingsbury, Daboll, Bobby, and Stenavich. Now, I'm sure many of you don't know who Stenavich is. He is the offensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. So keep that in mind. He doesn't call the plays in Green Bay. He works for Matt LaFleur. I believe Matt LaFleur promoted him when Luke Getsy and Nathaniel Hackett got poached away. He's a former offensive line coach. He was the assistant offensive line coach in San Francisco when Robert Saleh was there the first time. So there's that kind of incestuous LaFleur, McVay, Shanahan, Salah type of combination. Now, I found this list to be very fascinating, and I heard TD this morning mention Kliff Kingsbury as a possibility as far as the offensive coordinator search was concerned. Now, what I do think is funny about Kingsbury is Kingsbury went from, at the beginning of the year, a can't miss, will for sure be a head coach, to now he's in the mix for these offensive coordinator jobs. But we have to keep in mind that a lot of these head coaching jobs are still open. And so Brian Daboll is not going to take your job until he figures out that he's not going to be a head coach. Same with any of those other guys that are interviewing for those other jobs. Now, Bobby Slowik might take your offensive coordinator job because he needs a job, but he's not up for head coaching job. Same with Adam Stenavich. But if you're expecting Robert Saleh to hire Brian Daboll tomorrow, that's not going to happen because he's in the process of interviewing for the Bills job. Same with Kingsbury, who's in the process of interviewing for other head coaching jobs. And there are other offensive coordinator positions that are open. And so we have to keep our eyes on that. I mean, it sounds like nobody wants to be the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles because the last offensive coordinator got his house egged. So we'll keep that in mind. But I want to go through this list because I do think that it is likely that the next Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator is on that list. Again, let's put the names up on the screen. Kingsbury, Arthur, Daboll, Stenavich, Slowik. That's according to Tom Pelissero, once again, of NFL Network. Now, let's explain kind of the similarities and the differences with all of these guys before we put our hooks in. Brian Daboll runs the Erhardt-Perkins offense. That is Bill Parcells. That is what Bill Belichick, Charlie Weiss, Josh McDaniels, Bill O'Brien. That is what Tim Kelly ran. Erhardt-Perkins is very popular around the NFL. It was obviously more popular when Belichick and the Patriots were rolling, but that's what Ben Johnson in Chicago runs. It is a different style than the West Coast offense that a lot of teams in the NFL run nowadays, but Brian Daboll is an Erhardt-Perkins offensive coordinator. So he's over here. The other guys, Kingsbury, Slowik, and Arthur Smith, along with Adam Stenavich, and this is assuming that Adam Stenavich is going to run the offense that they run in Green Bay, they're all West Coast guys. And they're all disciples of McVay or Shanahan in some way. Arthur worked under LaFleur. LaFleur worked under McVay. Stenavich works under LaFleur and also worked under Shanahan. Slowik worked under Shanahan in San Francisco. And then Kingsbury, he played in the air raid at Texas Tech. And he played with the Patriots where they ran the Erhardt-Perkins. But he has been a West Coast coach since he entered the league, again, with the McVay-Shanahan ties, even though he never actually coached with McVay and Shanahan. So I took each one of these guys, and I said, all right, let me kind of do a dive into them without actually knowing any of these offensive coordinators other than Arthur, without knowing them personally or knowing their work ethic or what people have said about them or any of the personal stuff that is still reflective in your work, but any of the stuff that's not just on the resume, because that's what I have to go off of with these guys is the resume. And I decided to take each guy and really look at their best seasons, because the truth is Brian Daboll has had the second best offense in the NFL, and he's also had the 32nd offense in the NFL. The difference? One team was quarterbacked by Matt Castle. The other team was quarterbacked by Josh Allen. And that's just a reality of the NFL. Barry Switzer was not a good coach, but he won a Super Bowl in the NFL because he had all those great players on those Dallas Cowboys teams. So, with each guy, I looked at what they were at their best. And then I said, okay, who were their quarterbacks? For instance, Brian Daboll in 2021 with the Buffalo Bills had the number one offense in the NFL. But that's Josh Allen, who was starting to peak. That was prime Stephon Diggs at wide receiver. That was Dawson Knox at tight end. That was Deion Dawkins at left tackle. That was a very, very good offense. Now, again, Daboll coached them, so he gets credit for that. And then I looked at how much experience these guys have. How many years have they been doing it? And the reason I kind of pulled all of these things out, including what kind of systems they run, is because this is the single most important decision that Robert Saleh is going to make as head coach of the Titans. Who his first offensive coordinator is going to be. And I'm going to tell you why this is the most important decision Robert Saleh is going to make. Because Robert Saleh, and I know he's signing a 5-year contract, and I've been told don't worry about why it's taking so long to get officially announced. It'll be fine. But he's going to sign a 5-year contract, but we know Amy. And we know Amy has no problem paying off a coach. So with Robert Saleh, he's got really one crack at this. And they cannot be embarrassingly bad next year. And the whole purpose of his employment is to build up Cam Ward. because Cam Ward is going to be what decides his fate and Mike Borgonzi and probably Chad Brinker's fate as well. The dream they have is that Cam Ward is rounding into a franchise quarterback when they move into the new Nissan Stadium after this upcoming season. That's probably their dream. And the reason it's the most important thing I think Robert Saleh will do is because I think Robert Saleh is going to get the defense figured out. Robert Saleh is not picking the players. Mike Borgonzi is picking the players. And because, as we have talked about, Robert Saleh has got to just give the offense to the offensive coordinator and focus on defense. Today, Kaharski reported Bones Fossil is returning as special teams coach. Great. Give Bones Fossil the special teams and just stay out of it. And then when it comes to whomever you hire as offensive coordinator, it's going to be that guy's plan. It's going to be that guy's coaching staff. It's going to be that guy's system. It's going to be that guy with Cam Ward. That's why I'm kind of fascinated. And they'll never tell us what the details of Robert Saleh's amazing plan for Cam Ward was in the job interview, because that's proprietary information. We don't want to give that away. This is a strategic advantage. But I'm fascinated by what this defensive coach's plan for Cam Ward was, when, again, it really banks on who he hires as offensive coordinator, does it not? Well, if I hire Brian Daboll as the offensive coordinator and we run the Earhart-Perkins system, this is our plan for Cam. But if I don't get him, and then I hire Adam Stenavich, the offensive coordinator at Green Bay, and this is his plan for Cam. Again, Robert Saleh is not implementing the plan for Cam. Robert Saleh is hiring the guy who is going to implement the plan for Cam. So I have a really hard time believing that Robert Saleh had some kind of great plan for Cam Ward that won over the job, because, again, the way I interpret it is he's just going to give it to the offensive coordinator. The same way that when it comes to Drake May, with all due respect to Mike Vrabel, we think that Josh McDaniels has been the one implementing the plan with Drake May, and Mike Vrabel has just been overseeing it and monitoring it. That's what my expectation with Robert Saleh is. So let's get back to all these guys that are apparently on the list. Daboll, Kingsbury, Arthur, Stenavich, and Slowik. And let me start by saying, with the exception of Arthur Smith, I don't know a single one of these guys from a jar of Vicks. But I do know Arthur, and I do know Arthur can coach offense. I looked at each guy, and I said, okay, if the Titans were to hire this OC, and again, the way I'm looking at OC under Robert Saleh is the head coach of the offense, which Brian Callahan did a lot of things wrong as the head coach of the Titans. One of the things that he did massively, I think just unequivocally wrong, was he should have hired an experienced defensive coordinator. And with all due respect to Denard, who I'm sure is a fine coach, he should have hired an experienced defensive coordinator, given him the defense, and said, okay, Jim Schwartz, it's your defense. Okay, Lou Anarumo, it's your defense. Okay, whomever. That's what he should have done, and he didn't. He hired a first-time coordinator because he didn't know his ass from a pump handle. Now, when it comes to Saleh and the offensive coordinator hire, I am saying this is your offense. I hope Robert Saleh is hiring the head coach of the offense, which is what everybody I've talked to in New York has told me. They've said, and I work with a lot of people in New York at Sirius XM on Mad Dog Radio, and they have all said Saleh needs a good coordinator on the offensive side of the ball. So first I look at the quarterbacks, because my gut tells me that when it comes to the Titans, that's what they're doing. They're looking at the quarterbacks that these offensive coordinators have been involved with developing, and they're saying, okay, what do we want Cam Ward to be? Now, Cam Ward is a very tricky comp, because Cam Ward is not like a lot of other quarterbacks in the NFL, unless you're one of these people that just thinks he's Mahomes. And I haven't necessarily seen that. I don't think he's as good of a player. I don't think he's nearly as talented, and I don't think he's nearly as athletic as Caleb Williams. But maybe you could use Caleb Williams as a comp. He is not as physically gifted as Josh Allen. He doesn't move like Josh Allen. He's not big like Josh Allen. He doesn't play like Josh Allen. He doesn't play like Joe Burrow. Again, Rick Spielman, who's now with the Jets, but used to be a general manager, when he was doing a podcast on CBS, his comp to Cam Ward was Tyrod Taylor. Although, in fairness, he did say a better version of Tyrod Taylor. We've heard Matt Miller at ESPN compare Cam Ward to Jordan Love. So let's work off of that and say, okay, who is the best quarterback these guys have had? And do we think that's a good thing or a bad thing in comparison to Cam? For instance, Brian Daboll's best quarterback is Josh Allen. Now, I think that Cam's game is actually more like Daniel Jones than it is like Josh Allen, although Daniel Jones doesn't do a lot of throwing with his running. He usually just does a lot of running with his running. But I do think that when it comes to Daboll, the guy you would look at and say, okay, you did this with him, this is who we want Cam to become, would be similar to Josh Allen. Again, Josh Allen plays with kind of a recklessness, but it's controlled chaos. He runs around, he throws the ball, he makes superstar plays. Now, he's got every physical gift known to man, which Cam doesn't have. But Cam does have a little bit of that backyard football. Cam's a tough dude. Could you look at him and say, okay, let's do what you did with Josh Allen. Let's do that with Cam Ward, where accuracy did improve significantly and Josh Allen throws on the run. That's the first one. Then with Bobby Slowik, the comparison would be C.J. Stroud. I think C.J. Stroud is kind of a similar player to Cam. His mechanics are much better. He plays with better structure, but he's not an overly mobile quarterback. He's not an incredibly gifted athlete. He, again, doesn't have a giant cannon for an arm, but he's very efficient. Now, he doesn't play backyard football the way Cam does, but C.J. Stroud did look like a superstar in that first year under Bobby Slowik. And if you told me that Bobby Slowik's plan for C.J. Stroud, which really got derailed by how bad the offensive line the Texans were in year two, I could say, I could see some similarities, though not all. When I watched Cam's tape when he was coming out, I had a really hard time pegging a comparison. Not for his ability, because I thought his ability was that of the Kyler Murray and the Tua level, where he'll be good enough probably to get a second contract. He'll be one of the top 32 on the planet, but he'll probably never be good enough to consistently win. But as far as who he plays like, there's just not a lot of quarterbacks around the NFL that I think play like Cam. But I would say Slowik's number one guy was Stroud. Kliff Kingsbury, his number one guy is Mahomes, whom he coached in college and did have success with in terms of offense as his head coach. Now, they lost a lot of games 73-72, but he did have a lot of success with the air raid offense with Patrick Mahomes. And then, of course, Jaden Daniels in that first year where Jaden Daniels was really, really good with the Commanders. Now, Cam does not move like Jaden Daniels, and also Cam is not as small as Jaden Daniels, so I don't think Jaden Daniels is a very good comp for Cam, but we did see with those kind of mobile, smaller quarterbacks, we've seen Kliff Kingsbury have a little bit of success. Adam Stenavich. Now, he's a little tricky because even though he's the offensive coordinator in Green Bay, how much hands-on coaching of the quarterback has Adam Stenavich done? That's kind of Matt LaFleur's baby. He hasn't called the plays. He wasn't the offensive coordinator when they developed Jordan Love. He was the offensive line coach. But Jordan Love is probably the safest, closest comp to Cam Ward. So if you're saying, hey, we think he can be Jordan Love, and we drafted him number one overall thinking he was going to be Jordan Love, that may lean you in the direction of Adam Stenavich. And then the hardest one that I thought about trying to pair when it came to quarterbacks with the offensive coordinator was Arthur Smith. Because Arthur Smith's best quarterback was Ryan Tannehill. And his second best quarterback was who? I mean, the last 2 years in Pittsburgh, they made the playoffs with the corpse of Aaron Rodgers at quarterback and the corpse of Russell Wilson at quarterback. Mariota stinks, unfortunately. Great guy, not a good quarterback. Desmond Ridder stunk. Taylor Heineke stunk. The best quarterback he had was Tannehill. And again, Tannehill, I think, is a perfect West Coast quarterback. A 31-year-old Tannehill, I think, is great for what the Kubiaks and what the Shanahans and what those guys want to do. It's not as good as Matthew Stafford, but it's probably about as good as Jared Goff. And that's what Tannehill represents. But I don't think any of us think that Cam Ward plays like Tannehill, or that Cam Ward plays like Jared Goff, or that Cam Ward plays like Kirk Cousins, or that Cam Ward plays like Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy. So I can't really think about Arthur and Tannehill and use that as a comparison to what Arthur's going to do for Cam Ward. And so the best I could come up with when it came to Arthur Smith and saying, okay, he's demonstrated to us that the kind of quarterback play that he's going to have to get out of Cam, he possibly could develop, I guess would be Justin Fields, because Justin Fields tricked a lot of people into believing that he wasn't just absolute dog shit that year that he was in Pittsburgh and he played a couple of games. Because when he was with the Bears, they were looking to trade him. Everybody knew that they were going to trade Fields and draft Caleb. And they were looking for somebody who wanted Fields to be their starting quarterback so that they could kind of get a little bit of a bidding war going. And then they could say, okay, that's our guy. So now let's trade a second-round pick for Fields. That's what they thought they might be able to do. They were spreading rumors that, maybe we'll trade the pick and we'll keep Fields. And I was like, they are not keeping Fields. They are drafting Caleb Williams. The idea that they would – crazy. In Pittsburgh, Fields was 4-2 as a starting quarterback. Fields is 16-37 as a starting quarterback in the NFL. So 4-2 is pretty freaking impressive. Fields threw 5 touchdowns, 1 interception under Arthur. Fields had a quarterback rating of 93.3. That is by far much better than his career average of 84.7. But he still had a pretty crappy QBR. And my guess is he wasn't really asked to do much. But Arthur did win some games with Fields. So when it comes to Arthur, and again, we're just talking quarterbacks here. When it comes to Arthur and you're hiring a quarterback, I do have a hard time saying, hey, this is the guy that we want you to turn Cam Ward into. Because, again, his best quarterback was Ryan Tannehill. Now, when it comes to their offenses, their resumes, Brian Daboll's best offenses in 2020 and 2021 with Buffalo ranked first and second. Kliff Kingsbury's best offenses, 2020 in Arizona ranked sixth, 2024 in Washington ranked seventh. Bobby Slowik's best offense, the Texans, ranked 12th in 2023. And Arthur's best offense, 2020 Titans, ranked second in the NFL. Now, here's the one thing I will say. Who did the most with the least in that group? It's either Arthur or Slowik. Because, again, when Brian Daboll was coaching the Bills, and yes, he was a part of Josh Allen's ascension, but when he coached the Bills, they had Josh Allen. They had Josh Allen. They had a prime Stephon Diggs. They had Dawson Knox at tight end, Deion Dawkins at left tackle. They spent money in free agency on their team. I mean, they had a really good offense. So I can't put Daboll as the biggest overachiever. To me, it's Arthur in 2020 because outside of A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, most of that 2020 offense, guys played above what they normally do. Corey Davis left the Titans, and he was never any good with the Jets. Jonnu Smith left the Titans, and he's had a little bit of success here and there, but Jonnu Smith absolutely was not worth the $50 million that he got in free agency when he left the Titans because Arthur Smith had had success with him. And then, of course, there's Tannehill. David Quessenberry was the starting left tackle for that team. Dennis Kelly was the starting right tackle. So they didn't have a single starting tackle on that team, and they had the second-ranked offense in the NFL with Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown. That's pretty fucking good. The Texans in 2023 with Slowik had Dalton Schultz at tight end, pretty good. Robert Woods at wide receiver. Nico Collins developed under Bobby Slowik. C.J. Stroud at quarterback. Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. George Fant at right tackle. And Tytus Howard making $25 million to play left guard. I'd say Slowik overachieved in 2023. And that's why when they took that step back in 2024, everybody wanted to blame him. But I actually think he overachieved in 2023. So when I look at their resumes of just the offenses they've run, I have to go number one, outperforming, again, I think the curve. I would go with Arthur Smith there. But I can't peg the quarterback that I would say I want Arthur Smith to develop Cam into because I don't want Arthur Smith to develop Cam into Tannehill. And then the final thing with this is the experience. And the experience matters to me with these guys because, again, I am expecting them to build out the entire offensive coaching staff. I don't want Robert Saleh doing any of that because Robert Saleh wasn't very good at it with the Jets. Again, in the end of New York, he was hiring Keith Carter and Todd Downing, the two guys that I asked Vrabel directly about. Are you going to fire them? That's who Robert Saleh was hiring. And he was hiring them because Nathaniel Hackett was the coordinator. And so he was probably leaning on some of those guys that run the similar stuff. And Keith Carter was very close with Matt LaFleur. And so I think that's kind of a possibility. Brian Daboll has had 8 seasons as a play caller in the NFL, plus 4 years experience as a head coach where he didn't call the plays. Mike Kafka called the plays in New York. Kliff Kingsbury has 6 years experience as a play caller in the NFL, 2 years as an offensive coordinator in Washington, 4 years as a play calling head coach in Arizona. Bobby Slowik has 2 years experience running an offense. That's with the Texans. And Arthur Smith has 7 years experience. That's 2 in Pittsburgh, 2 in Tennessee, 3 as a play calling head coach with the Atlanta Falcons. Adam Stenavich has 0 experience when it comes to running an offense because, once again, Matt LaFleur runs the offense. So, given the fact that this is such a monumentally massive hire, and that the way I view Robert Saleh being a successful head coach with the Titans is going to depend on Robert Saleh being able to give the offense to one of these guys, and one of these guys being the head coach of the offense, who's the best candidate? The best overachievers, Arthur and Bobby Slowik. The best quarterbacks that you would want Cam to develop into, probably Kliff Kingsbury and Josh Allen. Or Brian Daboll with Josh Allen. Kingsbury with Mahomes and Josh Allen with Brian Daboll. The relationship with Salah, Stenavich, who worked with him in San Francisco, and Slowik, who worked with him in San Francisco. And the experience of running an offense or running a team would go to Daboll and Arthur. So which one do you choose? I cannot take Adam Stenavich seriously as a candidate here because, once again, you're going to ask this guy to be the head coach of the offense, and they need somebody with experience to do that. Adam Stenavich doesn't have that experience. He's out. So now it's between Slowik, Daboll, Kingsbury, and Arthur. Personally, I think I would go in this order. Daboll 1, because Daboll has proven that he can develop a quarterback, because he developed Josh Allen. Daboll can put together an offensive coaching staff because he did it in New York. He did it in Buffalo. He's been an offensive coordinator or a head coach for 12 seasons in the NFL. That's a lot of people he knows. And he's had the number one offense in the league. So when he's got the players, he can have the number one offense in the league. He can develop a quarterback, and he's got a big enough network to be able to go put together a coaching staff. I kind of see some similarities with him and Josh McDaniels. And I'll get to my second McDaniels point in a second. Number two, I think would be Slowik. The relationship with Salah, the fact that we know he can call the plays, the fact that C.J. Stroud by far looked his best under Bobby Slowik. Slowik would be number two, slightly ahead of Arthur, just because, again, I've seen Arthur succeed with Tannehill, who is a traditional West Coast offense quarterback, and Cam cannot be a traditional West Coast offense quarterback and have success. Slowik also has the experience of what they tried to implement in San Francisco when they thought Trey Lance was going to be their quarterback. Arthur has a little bit of that with Mariota, a little bit of that with Fields, but I think I would feel more comfortable with Slowik. So I think I'd go Slowik ahead of Arthur, then Kingsbury. Just because I don't know how much credit I really give Kliff Kingsbury when it comes to developing Patrick Mahomes. And it seems like Kingsbury butts heads a lot wherever he ends up. And it seems like he and Dan Quinn were butting heads. And that's the number one thing Robert Saleh can't do. Because, again, you're going to go up against this guy in practice. You are going to have an adversarial relationship throughout OTAs, the offseason program, training camp. It's going to be your defense versus his offense. So you're going to have an adversarial relationship on the field. You need to have a good relationship off the field. I don't know, Kliff kind of rubs me as the kind of guy who probably is tough to work with. Now, Daboll has that too, going back to him in Wink Martindale in New York. So the way I would rank it right now, Daboll 1, Bobby Slowik 2, Arthur 3, Kingsbury 4. But I think there's a pretty good gap for me between 1, 2, and 3 and 4. And then there's one other element to this that I'm sorry, but I think it needs to be discussed. Because people get very, very upset for some reason whenever I bring this up, or for some reason they think it's gay, which I don't necessarily get. Brian Daboll is not a good-looking guy. I'm sorry. He's bald. He's fat. He's just not a good-looking guy. He's not a young coach. The NFL loves the young, fit, defined jawline, nice beard, good teeth, offensive coordinator. If Brian Daboll builds out his coaching staff and Brian Daboll has Cam Ward as his quarterback and he develops Cam Ward into a star quarterback, there may be less takers for Brian Daboll, who's already failed as a head coach and who, again, is bald and fat. Same with Arthur Smith. If Kliff Kingsbury has success with Cam Ward as the quarterback, Kliff Kingsbury's getting a head coaching job. If Bobby Slowik has success with Cam Ward as the offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowik is getting a head coaching job. Now, I believe when it comes to hiring a coach, I'll worry about that when it happens. Like if all of a sudden they end up hiring Kliff Kingsbury and the Titans have the number 3 offense in the NFL and Cam Ward turns into Mahomes and then other teams want to hire Kingsbury, I'll worry about that then. I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But if you are thinking longevity, if you are one of these people who is afraid of, well, I hired a defensive coach, and so if my offense is good, I'm going to lose my offensive coordinator if I have success, I think Daboll or Arthur's your choice, because the trend around the league is that ugly, fat coaches do not get hired. They don't get a lot of second chances. And Daboll and Arthur would both be looking for a second chance. I do not understand how Arthur Smith cannot get a second chance in this league as a head coach. Arthur Smith was a great offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. You all saw it with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback. Arthur Smith goes to the Falcons. They have no quarterback for 3 years. They're 7-10 those 3 years, which again, it's bad, but it's not Brian Callahan bad. And then he goes to the Steelers playing with the corpse of Aaron Rodgers and the corpse of Russell Wilson, and they make the playoffs twice. Again, 4-2 with Justin Fields. Justin Fields fucking stinks. And yet nobody wants to hire Arthur Smith to be a head coach. I think it's because he's fat. I think it's because he's got that ugly-ass mustache. I think that stuff does matter. So if you're really scared of, oh my God, if Kliff Kingsbury develops Cam Ward, then he's gone, I think Arthur or Daboll kind of lean there. So again, for me with this list that Pelissero put out there, I would go Daboll 1, Slowik 2, Arthur 3, Kingsbury 4, and I'm not considering Adam Stenavich, who's never run an offense. And again, I think the Titans they're not hiring an offensive coordinator. They're hiring the head coach of the offense for Robert Saleh. With that, back by popular demand. And there are very few people that earn the popular demand that I'm about to give. Easton Freeze, AtoZ Sports, joins us on the program. Easton, I actually seriously mean this. When I say back by popular demand, I really mean that, because last week people were like, oh God, we loved you, Easton, on the program. So welcome back to the Stillman and Company show. Easton, we can't hear you.
Bet you can now. Hello?
I can hear you now.
There it is. There's a button that I had to press that I hadn't pressed. It's so great to be back. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's great to hear that so many people wanted a little bit more of whatever this nonsense is that we do back and forth. So I am happy to be here, and I'm happy that the folks enjoyed the first one.
So the last time you were on, we put on the bottom of your crawl, we put Easton Freeze, friend of Brian Callahan. This week,
right,
we have Easton Freeze made his bones during the coaching search, because I feel like the mafia, where you got to become a made man, I feel like you made your bones during the coaching search. Great info. The first McCarthy meeting, which was it a meeting? Was it an interview? I don't know. But again, it's not like they were over there talking about what TV shows they were watching on Netflix when they all went out to dinner in Wisconsin. And then Adam Schefter backed you up on that. So I thought, good info. You came on the show last week. You said you thought Salah was going to be the coach. Salah became the coach. Okay, let's start with what the hot topic is, which is the offensive coordinator search. We've got the list from Pelissero. Where do you think the Titans are on offensive coordinator with Robert Saleh?
I think they're waiting to see if Brian Daboll is going to get the job in Buffalo. Like, I really do think that this is as simple as he's their top choice. I'm not going to report that. I really don't know that for sure. But the tea leaves seem to indicate that he's their top choice. I understand why he would be their top choice. He's on that list of people that you were talking about before I came on here. He and Arthur Smith, I believe, are the only guys that are on that list that they also interviewed during the head coach process, right? So the entire leadership group has recent experience talking to him. We know that Mike Borgonzi has a pretty good relationship. You talk about buddy hires. Here's the sleeper buddy hire for you here, Jared. Mike Borgonzi and old Brian Daboll go way back, and apparently they've got a pretty strong relationship. So I joke. I really don't think that would be a bad thing. I just think that might be another feather in his cap as they consider the guy that is, I think you're 100% right, going to be the head coach of the offense 100%. It's a very important position, and I have no idea if he's going to get the Buffalo job or not, but if he doesn't, I'm kind of expecting him to just come take this job.
Okay, so now let's play, hypothetical here. He gets the Buffalo job. He's off the table. Now it's Kingsbury, Arthur, Stenavich, Slowik. Who would you lean towards in that instance?
Man, I heard you talking about Arthur right before I came on, and I understand the appeal based on what he did the last time he was here. Obviously, it was the most exciting period of offensive football that I've ever watched the Titans go through as an adult, at least, where I could really appreciate it. So I get that. I do think that what he has done offensively since then has just proven him to be not a bad play caller or schemer by any means. He's one of the more unique flavors in the NFL right now. And I'm not sure if that unique flavor is what this group in Tennessee is looking to give the Cam Ward offense. I don't think it would be some disaster by any means. I just think it'd be a little bit different than what these other guys, like he's the most different of the offensive flavors on this list. So I would probably lean Kliff Kingsbury, but I honestly haven't the slightest idea if they're really interested in him or not. The very early reporting that was done nationally on him being on the list of initial candidates, I came to learn as time went on and as he continued to not get an actual interview on the books, that seemed to be a lot more of Kingsbury interest than Titans interest. I don't know the true story as to what fell through or what never existed on that front, but it seemed a little bit weird to me based on the things that I heard. And so I am super not sure that they're actually that interested. Now, maybe Salah is interested, and now that means the Titans are interested and they weren't before. That could certainly be the case. But he'd probably be my pick if I was the one making the decision.
Okay, so I do wonder this on the offensive front with Salah and his involvement in this. So Robert Saleh reportedly wowed the Titans with his plan for Cam Ward on offense. But I have a hard time understanding how that's possible when, again, he's going to hire a coach to be the head coach of the offense, and the head coach of the offense is going to implement the plan for Cam. And I can't assume that these guys that run different offenses are going to all have the same plan for Cam. And that includes the offensive coaching staff, which was a big problem Salah had in New York. And in the end, he was hiring guys like Todd Downing and Tim Kelly, Todd Downing and Keith Carter, which is not going to go over well here if Keith Carter is the offensive line coach or Todd Downing is the play caller.
I'm kind of rooting for it because it'd be really funny, wouldn't it?
That will not go over well.
No.
So I ask you this question, which is, when it comes to this unbelievable plan that Salah had, how can he have a great plan for Cam Ward if they aren't for sure who the head coach of the offense is going to be implementing that plan and hiring the offensive coaching staff?
Yeah, I hear you on that. And that's a part of it. I think if we're trying to diagnose what exactly they were wowed by, I feel like it is what he laid out in terms of the identity of the football team that he would be running. And this is something that we've heard talked about a lot recently, which I think is fair. Like, this team has lacked identity since the peak of Tannehill and Derrick Henry and all those boys. Like, we knew who the Titans were when they showed up on Sunday during that era. And since then, I do think identity is largely driven by your best players and what they're good at, obviously. So having worse players since then has been the primary issue there. But I do think your coaching staff and the way that you want to approach playing a football game, whether it, certain guys try to score a trillion points every week, no matter what. Certain guys like Vrabel, we know that their style is to always, no matter the opponent, try to play in a phone booth. And sometimes that means playing up or playing down to an opponent, kind of. I think that the identity of this team is something that the leadership group was really impressed by when Salah laid out his vision for it. And I think that his personality obviously lends to a belief in, like, yeah, I'm buying what this guy's selling in terms of identity. And I think that it's the kind of thing that they're like, the players will eat this up. So I think that's the impressive part to them. And as much as the offensive guy is going to come in and do what he does from a playbook standpoint and from a head coach of the offense standpoint, he's still going to collaborate with the head coach. And I think you're not going to want to hire an offensive coordinator that can only run one certain kind of offense, frankly, because I think the vision for this team in 2026, based on the personnel they're liable to have, that kind of offense is probably going to have to be a little different than the kind of offense they could theoretically run in 27 and 28 when they get better, older players in the building. Like, you're going to kind of open things up and probably run a different offense than you will now. You're a little bit limited. So you need somebody that's going to be flexible in that way.
So you're saying that the plan for Cam Ward is more of an identity plan than it is a detailed schematic plan?
That's my best guess. I mean, I'm sure that Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker have an idea of the kind of scheme that they want or that they think Cam Ward would best work in. But I think that they're ultimately going to defer to what these coaches think because they're coaches and and Chad and Mike are executives. So I would at least hope that they're leaning on what a guy like Salah comes in and says. I think a Cam Ward skill set plays best in this kind of system right now, given the pieces that we have. And these are the guys that I have strong connections with who I think can come in and implement that kind of a scheme. Robert's probably already talked to them because, these coaches, they dot their T's and they cross their I's, or whatever the saying is. They talk beforehand about, hey, if I get this Titans job, what would you think about being the OC, and what would you want to do as an offensive guy? So there's some semblance of a plan on that front behind the scenes, I'm sure.
It is official, by the way. The Titans have hired Robert Saleh, and there's a statement from Robert Saleh. There's a statement from Mike Borgonzi and a statement from Amy Adams Strunk. Let's do the Amy one. From Amy, quote, "We are delighted to welcome Robert and his family to the Titans and firmly believe that he is the right person for our team and community. We immediately connected with his competitive spirit and detailed approach to developing our players and team, even though he didn't develop any players with the Jets. I digress. Also, Robert's recommendations from across the league were overwhelmingly positive and only reinforced during our time together. I want to thank Mike Borgonzi and his leadership during this process and acknowledge the work done by the search committee." Another committee. Got to have a committee. "They dedicated so much time and effort, and I'm thrilled with the results. And most importantly, I believe Titans fans will be too. Congratulations to Robert and his family, and welcome to Nashville." You know who else came from San Francisco with unbelievable recommendations around the league?
Jared?
The great Rand Carthon. So, look, I know they got to say what they got to say, but it is what it is. Okay. On that front, what happened with Salah and Nagy and Borgonzi and Amy? Because I flew off the fucking handle on Monday when I saw TD's report that said, original report that has since been redacted, but his original report that said Amy Adams Strunk urged Borgonzi to hire Salah over Nagy. His preference was Nagy. And now it's come out that that couldn't be further from the truth. And this is who Borgonzi had to have. What do we make of it? What do we know?
Jared, actually, I kind of like redacted more. I'd like ESPN articles that just have black bars in the article that you can't read anymore. I don't know for sure. So I want to make it clear that I'm not in a position, maybe a week from now, maybe a month from now, I'll be in a position to give more concrete information from my perspective. But I'm not going to pretend that I have gotten an answer to all of the questions that I have on that front. What I do feel good about is that I know that I trust TD in his capacity as a reporter, and I think that he does honorable, honest work. And so when he says something, I think that there's usually a very good reason for him saying it. In the same breath, I'll say that when he takes something back that he said, there is just as good, if not more important reason behind why he would do that. And so my general understanding of that situation is that he got information from somebody that was a really incomplete picture on what had happened. And once he got a fuller picture of what had happened, it materially changed what he understood to be true. And that's why he went and changed it. I think that whenever you have a race that comes down to the bitter end, the way that this did, with two guys and a large stable of people that didn't get finalist interviews, there are a lot of people that feel like they were unfairly passed over, maybe, or should have been the choice, or were under the impression that maybe they were the choice and then suddenly they weren't the choice. Like there's a lot of different people with different interests in play that all have a part of the picture in mind because they've been a part of the picture, but very few of them have the full picture. And so I think people's understandings of what is happening, especially in the moment on this kind of thing, can be tricky, can be really incomplete. And once you get a zoomed out view that very few people have, it makes a lot more sense why somebody felt the way that they did and why it seemed they were a good source on something, but ultimately what their perspective was just not the reality.
In English?
Yeah, there's coaches and agents and executives involved, and people have different opinions on how things work.
I mean, it kind of felt like a lot of tap dancing there in order for you to get that out.
Well, because again, I haven't gotten if I'm putting my reporter hat on, I've not gotten satisfactory answers on these things, so I can only speculate like you can. Well, I'm inclined to believe that TD took it back because it wasn't true.
I'm inclined to believe that TD took it back because the Titans flipped the fuck out. That's what
I'm sure you are. Yes, that's entirely unsurprising.
I think that I think there's probably some truth to it. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as far as Borgonzi was really leaning Nagy and Amy pushed Salah over the top. And because Paul said that, oh no, Amy went to Borgonzi and said, whoever you pick, I'm cool with. And I just don't believe that either. And so I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And I think the reason that TD retracted the report is because I think the Titans flipped the fuck out. That's why. Not that I think that TD answers to the Titans, but if the Titans are going to freak out about it, it's not worth, nuking the entire relationship and story and everything else to put that out there. That's just my gut, the way that I feel about it.
And I'm not surprised that's how you feel about it. I mean, to make it crystal clear how I feel about it, I have absolutely 100% zero reason to believe that it is true. And I know that TD has said now unequivocally that he was wrong. And I know that Kaharski has now said that he knows it to be untrue. And think whatever you want about Paul. When he says he knows something to be true, he tends to know it to be true. And so I have looked, I have asked, I have poked and prodded. I have found not a single shred of evidence that it was true.
I just have a hard time believing the Titans. Because the Titans have lied so many times.
We know you do.
They lie. So if they keep lying,
every team lies.
But they lie the most. They came out.
They're 32 out of 32.
They told Diana Vrabel was coming back. And then they fired Vrabel.
Did they tell her that?
Yes.
Did Mike tell her that? I don't know who told her that.
But Vrabel did not have the authority to. Vrabel doesn't have the authority for the New York Times to tell Diana that Vrabel's coming back and for her to write that. It has to be
another Titans coach in the past screwed with the media in that way.
I know, but again, that's because Ian Rappaport is not good at what he does. He doesn't work for the New York Times, who would sit there and say, no, I caught Ian Rappaport up in a lie one time over a Tannehill restructure, and that one, because everybody was, I said, there's no way they did a full restructure on Tannehill. And then Ian Rappaport said they did, and everybody was like, oh, Jared, yeah, you're an idiot. And then it came out that they didn't. And then I texted Ian Rappaport that they didn't. And then Ian Rappaport said, I think I'll stand by the original reporting. And then an hour later changed it. And I get all worked up when that story comes up. But I digress. Last one for you. On the Titans front, do you think, based off of everything that you've heard from people that covered Salah with the Jets, the fact that his tenure was not very good in New York, the fact that they did not develop the quarterback Zach Wilson, even though Zach Wilson might stink, do you think this is the right call, that Salah is the leader of men, that he is Mike Vrabel 2.0? Do you actually buy that or not?
Well, first, I think that the Mike Vrabel 2.0 thing that's being pushed nationally is, like, I get where it's coming from. It's convenient. It's easy. I don't think that they're, like, the people that I have heard that know both of those guys pretty well talk about that comparison. They all seem to say, like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but they're not the same dude, which I don't really know what that means. I'm looking forward to getting to know Robert Saleh. But in terms of the leader of men aspect thing, like that whole thing, I think that trait that they share is something that every player, every coach that I've ever heard talk about Robert Saleh has that kind of thing to say about him. Even the guys that aren't necessarily his biggest fans, some of the spilt milk that you heard in the immediate aftermath of the New York saga, like former New York players, former San Francisco players, coaches that he's worked with, they all seem to have the same opinion of Robert Saleh, that he is a natural leader, that he is somebody that is very easy to buy into, very easy to follow. And when you hear these players that he's not even coaching their side of the ball, right? Like Brock Purdy and George Kittle, and they go on the record for these things. When you hear them talk as glowingly of him as they do, I think that there's a lot of weight there. So I TBD, we'll see how he interacts with the players here and what my interactions are with him like, what my interactions with him are like. But he sure seems to be the kind of guy that he's being billed as.
I said last one, I lied. As the chief defender of Callahan in the city of Nashville, Tennessee, what'd you make of Simmons just ripping his ass on Bussin' with the Boys?
We don't have enough time for that. I think it sounds like Jeffrey Simmons wishes Vrabel never got fired. It sounds like Brian Callahan super duper was not Mike Vrabel, which was kind of half the reason they hired him, right? And it sounds like I think the archetype of coach that Brian Callahan was pretty clearly not the archetype of coach that this bottoming out roster needed in hindsight.
Easton Freeze, AtoZ Sports, again, made his bones, in my opinion, during this coaching search. Don't take no shit from PK, Easton.
Never.
There you go, Easton Freeze joining us on the program from AtoZ Sports. Again, like I said, back by popular demand because you people wanted Easton back on there. I did see the reports from PK. Apparently, Bones Fossil is in, Nick Holtz is out, and Denard Wilson is out. Look, Denard Wilson was always going to be out. That's just the nature of coaching. That's not a reflection of whether or not he's any good. But Robert Saleh is going to be the defensive coordinator of the Titans. Whoever is technically the defensive coordinator is going to be Robert Saleh's assistant because Robert Saleh is going to run the defense. He's not going to keep Denard Wilson in that role just because Denard Wilson might be a good coach. Not interested in that. Nick Holtz is out because, again, I think you're going to hire a head coach of the offense who's going to hire the entire offensive coaching staff. Now, the one thing I want to get to is when it comes to two things that happened in the NFL, one with the Titans and one that didn't happen with the Titans. And the first one is with the Titans and the coaching staff and the offensive coordinator and where they head from here. I have a hard time with the Robert Saleh, Mike Vrabel comparisons simply because even though Vrabel had his faults and building out the coaching staff was one of them, and Vrabel could be sensitive at times. He would never admit that, but he could be. Vrabel was the most detail-oriented coach I have ever seen the Tennessee Titans have. That's why they didn't commit a lot of penalties. And when I heard Jeffrey Simmons and Taylor Lewan and Will Compton on Bussin' with the Boys talk about the notes and the meetings, it reminded me of Floyd talking about what it was like in New England. One time I asked Floyd, I said, what's the difference between New England? Back when everybody thought New England was smarter than everybody and everybody was better than everybody and everybody was New England. They just had that magic sauce and it wasn't all Tom Brady. And he said, Belichick would expect you to know everything about the team you're about to play. Belichick, if you won, he'd give you Monday off. But when you showed up at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, you better be ready to answer the questions that Bill Belichick is going to ask. And they could be questions like, who's the offensive coordinator? Where'd he go to college? And you need to have that in your notebook. You need to have written that down so you're prepared when Bill asks. And it doesn't sound like Callahan did any of that and Vrabel's doing that. And when I hear that with the Jets, one of the biggest problems with Robert Saleh was that they were bad in the division, or when I hear that they were incredibly penalized, that tells me he didn't have the same attention to detail that Mike Vrabel had. And so I don't believe, again, Robert Saleh seems like this really nice guy who people just love being around and a great defensive coordinator, which again, there's proof in the pudding, both with the Jets and the 49ers on. And so, yeah, people may like him and he may wow you, but his personality sounds nothing like Vrabel's. So I'm fine with, hey, Saleh is a guy that these players are going to love so much that they are not going to want to disappoint. And that Saleh's going to have the right offensive coordinator, and the right offensive coordinator is going to develop the plan for Cam Ward. I can live with that. I can't live with, this is Mike Vrabel 2.0, because it doesn't sound like anything that Robert Saleh did in New York is anything like Mike Vrabel when he was here, or Mike Vrabel with the Patriots, other than the fact that they both hired Keith Carter and Todd Downing. Now, I want to get to the press conference that Terry Pagula, the owner of the Buffalo Bills, held, that boy Twitter didn't like. Oh my God, did you see that press conference? It was so bad in Buffalo. Nobody's going to want the job. Really? Because Brian Daboll is interviewing for that job today. And my guess is with Josh Allen as the quarterback, every single real candidate is going to want that job. Terry Pegula threw Keon Coleman under the bus. Keon Coleman, a disappointing second-round pick that has been benched for games for violations of team rules. Keon Coleman, who was supposed to be a first-round draft choice, did not test well at the combine and fell significantly into the second round. And Terry Pegula at the press conference pointed out when asked about the problems at wide receiver, which the Bills absolutely have, in defense of his general manager, pointed out Keon Coleman as a guy that the coaches wanted to draft. And a lot of people, I think, took this the wrong way. A lot of people looked at that and they said, the owner is throwing Keon Coleman under the bus. First of all, the owner can do whatever he wants. He owns the team. Rich people, the one thing, the real one muscle that they can flex, for the most part, is what's called the id-gaff muscle. The I don't give a fuck. What are you going to do to make Terry Pegula's life worse because you're mad at him? Oh, yeah, nothing. Most of these owners can say whatever they want. My takeaway from the Keon Coleman comments was not, oh my God, here's an owner throwing the coach under the bus or throwing Keon Coleman under the bus, which is what happened. But it's an owner who's keeping score. It's an owner that is keeping score of what's going on inside the building. Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the owner. Whether it's the Titans with Rand Carthon and Mike Vrabel or Floyd Reese and Jeff Fisher, the head coach and the general manager are going to have disagreements. The owner is the one who's going to have to know who's responsible for what. So when it came to why the Titans were successful with Jeff Fisher and Floyd Reese, Steve McNair, Eddie George, Javon Kearse, Derek Mason, those were Floyd Reese's picks. But did Bud Adams know that? Did Bud Adams know that Jeff Fisher had virtually nothing to do with the development of Steve McNair? I don't think he did. We found out when Jeff Fisher got full control with the Titans in the end that he wasn't very good. And we found out that when Jeff Fisher was running the Rams, he wasn't very good. But we didn't know that at that time. The owner is supposed to know that because the owner is supposed to be there. And Bud Adams wasn't. The owner has to keep score. I believe that an owner hires a general manager and the general manager runs the franchise. In some cases, they hire the coach and the coach runs the franchise. But these jobs are big for one person to do all of it. Somebody has to run the personnel department while somebody runs the actual football team. The coach runs the team. The general manager runs the personnel department. And then who picks the players is basically who makes more money or has more power between the two. In the case in Buffalo, Brandon Beane ran personnel. Sean McDermott ran the team. And in the end, he was deciding who to pick between. And he picked Brandon Beane because he felt like the scoreboard he kept said Brandon Beane was better than Sean McDermott. That is what a good owner does. A disengaged owner that never shows up is only relying on reports from their lieutenants. I'd prefer an owner who actually observes with their own eyes. And then when the owner decides that the general manager can't do it anymore or the head coach can't do it anymore, that's when you go to pull the plug. So while a lot of people, I think the national perception of that Keon Coleman comment from Terry Pegula was, how dare the owner do that? My reaction was, at least the owner there is keeping score and knows who is responsible for what. That was my takeaway. And no, that press conference wasn't so bad that nobody's ever going to want to coach Josh Allen. That's it for us. I don't think we'll have a show tomorrow. We will be on the road for a little bit here, and then we will be at the Super Bowl. That's right. Stillman and Company going back to the Super Bowl. We will be there in San Francisco. We've got that all ironed away. Very, very excited for that. So that's it for us. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. And if any news breaks, we'll go live. Stillman and Company. See everybody very, very soon. We'll keep you up to date. Like and subscribe. Tell all your friends. Turn those notifications on. Stillman and Company, 440 Sports. Peace.